and welcome to another Disclosure in the Media. This is our Halloween special this week. So I'm here with Ryan again,
Hello.
and we are doing an episode on Necromancy in the Elder Scrolls series. So take it away, Ryan.
All right, everybody. So necromancy is essentially a magic form outside that is tied in with the school of conjuration. So conjuration magic is basically summoning. Necromancy is the darker side of that summoning magic. And summoning magic is already kind of dark considering you're pulling entities out of other dimensions. Sorry about that. So necromancy is the raising of the dead and the binding of souls, essentially. In the Elder Scrolls lore, it is usually kind of considered to be not an okay thing to do, but a lot of the time it's still practiced. Culturally, we'll go into which cultures view it as all right, what their stipulations on it are. But generally speaking, it's not a good thing. Now, for instance, the Imperials, if you're in good with the Imperial government, they'll give you dead prisoners to experiment necromancy on. If you're in Somerset Isles, necromancy is banned on high elves alone. So you just can't raise the dead of a high elf. You can raise anyone else. In Morrowind, it's basically the same thing. You can't raise dark elves. Slaves you're okay to raise, and prisoners. It gets iffy when it comes to other stuff, but in Morrowind there's also like this magic where it's like, because necromancy, you're also controlling that dead being. There's other magic in Morrowind that's like, let's summon the spirit of our dead ancestors, but they still have agency. They still are in control of themselves, and it's mostly just a way to gain, like, commune with them. In High Rock, it's actually fairly rare because they cremate their dead for the most part. In Southern High Rock, necromancy is kind of weird in the Reach because the Reachmen religion don't really put a taboo on it, so they kind of just do it. In Argonia, in Black Marsh, the Argonians, it is abhorrent to any Argonian to do it on them because they believe that Argonians are property of the Hist, and so doing that it like breaks their bonds with the Hist. But any other race is okay. And then there's the societies that hate it the most are the Bosmer, the Wood Elves, because of the Green Pact, which says like if you kill something, you're meant to like eat it and use the parts. So yeah, like using it to raise the dead, that's not helpful to them, especially because usually when things that have been risen die, they kind of just collapse into a pile of ash. In Skyrim, it is hated and basically viewed with open hostility from everyone. And in the most hostile society to it is definitely the Red Guards, who many of them are worshippers of Arche, the god of life and death, who basically views it as a deep evil. And there's even clans of Redguard that will go on like witch hunts, and they will go on so far as to like sometimes hunt down any mage dabbling in any magic, even like adjacent to necromancy. If they could even like tumble across necromancy by accident, they will wipe them out. Like if you're a conjurer, you're pretty much done in Hammerfell.
Yeah, I've seen some of these magic techniques before, similarly, like where I've seen, say, someone's soul cleaved from a body before and another one has been. And some people say this is a walk-in process, but the darker end of that process is essentially necromancy or some kind of dark possession where sometimes through the silver cord that people have, sometimes beings will siphon out like a straw your consciousness and filter in theirs over a period of time. Orions like to use this trick a lot. The binding rituals I've seen on dead bodies before, or people that are nearly dying, where I have seen a demon being bound to somebody who is dying, and this as they die, that ghost then fuses with this demonic form. It's kind of like a Freddy Krueger type situation with the Dream Demon a little bit, where it fuses with him and he becomes Freddy Krueger. It's kind of like a situation like that. Ironically said, because this is a Halloween episode, but this scenario, I've seen ghosts that are fused with like Wendigo, Mimicker demons, ghouls. I've seen all variations of that. Orions, where Orions will keep them inside of their own like bodies, essentially, and fuse their personalities with and project outward. If they project this outward, some people think that that being is their dead loved one. Syrians like to pull this. They did a great example in Dragon Ball Z with the character of Cell, where he had all the cellular memories of all the heroes, and he was able to project it out. It's something like that, but back to the necromancy side of it, where you can literally raise a body. If you put it inside of like a binding circle, you can raise a body, fuse a demon consciousness in there, or have a soulless being, and that can become a vampire if you have a certain viral contagion to go with it. So yeah, there are different variations on this theme that actually exist.
All right, so we're going to get into the pictures here now. And just to start, we have just kind of just showing the magic behind it. Usually it is accompanied by bluish to like light green magics, like effects that can be seen. It is almost always done a bit more ritualistically than just like casting a spell. It usually has to do with, in some cases, we'll even go into how one turns themselves into a lich, which is like the ultimate form of necromancy. And it basically is binding yourself within your body while being dead and alive at the same time, without becoming like a vampire. It's very strange, the thing of lich. So here you can see that they have like a ritual circle, and like dead. They were probably leaving these skeletons out to like lose the flesh. There's talk about in some of the lore books how, in fact, there's one lore book about necromancy that even gives a description on how best to cure bodies to make them skeletons, so that when you raise them, they don't have flesh on them. And one of the things in it, which is funny, it's like, leave the bodies on a beach and mud crabs and other small creatures will come and eat away the flesh, and you'll be left with just a skeleton. In the same book, it talks about how like necromancers can use like leather and other objects to kind of strengthen skeletons that they raise. There's also a belief in the Elder Scrolls that the older a dead body is, the easier it is to control. I don't know.
That actually makes sense to me, believe it or not, because this is actually, I'll divert slightly. I went to a cemetery that's very old. It's in Illinois. It's outside of Chicago, and it's called not Forest Home. Forest Home is one as well, but the Bachelor's Grove. It was near where all the mob would bury their bodies and throw bodies in the swamp and the bogs and stuff back in there. Well, this particular cemetery, my father and a friend named Dave Pappas and I, members of Sage, we went to this cemetery, and I saw this pagan lady or this witch going around and tapping like all the grave stones. And I'm going, okay, what's she doing? And I noticed she was possessed with some kind of jinn or other demonic being was fused into her back. Her energy was red. It was like cherry red. And so she was going around tapping all the gravestones. And I noticed the energies of the skeletons that were underneath were being pulled off. And she was using them in some kind of necromancy type of ritual. She was doing something when we caught her. She stopped doing it as soon as we walked in there, but I was observing her for a little bit. She was using these energies to create a poltergeist or a construct of some kind. It's a form of necromancy, even if it's energy. And you can piece together like a Frankenstein. You can create out of different energies. You can create a poltergeist, even though poltergeist is really something that a person is repressing and it projects outward as magic, kind of like the character of Credence in the Fantastic Beasts series.
Oh, yeah, with the Obscurus.
Yeah, with the Obscurus, yes. It's usually like that. But the other version is where a group can piece together, even technologically, or magically or both can create a guardian something or other. It could be a statue, it could be a robot, it could be a energy, it could be a skeleton, it could be a zombie, it could be anything, you know. And this person was peeling these energies off this skeleton and creating these things and capturing them, putting them in something. Like holding them in an energy pocket. Sometimes in the self, they can hold it and ferry it out of there and then take it out of themselves and put it in a crystal or something too. I've seen that. I don't recommend that for anybody to ever do. But this is essentially that. This is why the older the remains, the stronger that residual remains on the energy on the remains is. Ghouls usually feed off of this. If you have a bunch of ghouls around, they'll chew on the bones if there's dead flesh, if it's a physical ghoul. If it's an energetic ghoul, they usually feed off of this, and there's not much left after they've been there. But they're like vultures. So they usually get it as a person's dying. But the older that is undisturbed, the greater chance you can to have an energy on it to use. So that's actually accurate, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think the reason that they give inside the lore has to do with like the soul is less attached to the body the further out that it is. And in fact, we know that there are times where the soul isn't even involved, but there are times in necromancy where the soul is involved. Most notably, we know because you can trap a soul in a black soul gem and still raise the corpse. But you can also show one of the best examples is in Skyrim, Olaf One Eye. He's one of the Draugr like bosses that you fight in one of the crypts during the Bard's College quest line. You can fight his Draugr, but you can also meet him in Sovngarde when you go for the end of the main quest line. And so that's just proof that the soul isn't always involved in necromancy. But there are many times it is, because one of the other versions of necromancy is just raising ghosts. It's just bringing the soul back as a ghost. It's not the most common, though. Normally, you raise a corpse because a corpse has more uses, basically.
As a guardian, as also, this was done in also The Witcher 3 video game as well, where you come across in the Hearts of Stone DLC, where that guardian was guarding the mansion property, and that was something that was pieced together and conjured as well. So it was done by different. You take different magics, different frequencies, and piece these puzzle pieces together and Frankenstein something essentially together. Then you have like a Frankenstein guardian type of deal too, and that is possible. People think this is just movie stuff, but these are actual magical techniques that can actually be done.
Yeah. So now we're gonna get into the types and some of the uses of these. Zombies are one of the major ones, like these kind of just husk zombie creatures. A lot of times they're just used as servants, guards for things. Zombies in the Elder Scrolls aren't like zombies in like traditional media, where if they bite you, they'll spread it. They're almost always in association with necromancy or some kind of like specific place where the undead just are. So usually tombs and things have like magics in them that can wake the dead if they're disturbed.
Like if a particular energy crosses past a certain seal or a certain door, it would wake. You could time it to wake something up like that. Yeah, exactly.
This picture is actually also good because it shows that there's a connection between vampires, because it's a vampire lord in the back, and necromancy, because a lot of vampires will use necromancy to sort of bolster their troops, to sort of speak, or just to defend themselves. Most notably, Serana does it all the time in Skyrim.
Yeah, she raises their body.
Yeah, she raises corpses all the time. It actually gets quite annoying sometimes. It's like the first thing she does is like, I'm like, oh, Serana, can we not do necromancy right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does get a little annoying if you're using her as a companion. Yeah.
Alternatively, these like dogs that are usually found around vampires they're like necromantically raised dogs.
I've seen this before. Also, they like to say these things are hellhounds in myth and lore. I found out the actual name of them is Karmishka or Karmeshka, and what they are is I found out they're a genetically conjured manifestation of like a Essentially, there were certain dogmen that helped create these, and certain other races that helped create these, where they're conjuring a necromantic, a type of energy. There was also a jinn energy in there as well that makes it so that they can phase in and out dimensionally. If you spot one of these, it's supposed to be an omen of dark times. They mentioned this in, again, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Edition, where you run into some of these hellhounds as well. And I believe it's in Toussaint you run into some of this. But with this, though, sometimes there's an omen that goes with this. But this is also an actual race of dogs that can that were created and conjured the same way, like a dead hound, and it was associated with the devil after a while. But they're actually interdimensional. They can phase in and out in certain cycles of the moon and planet cycles as well. But they can be brought through at any time through necromancy type techniques and conjuring techniques too.
Vampires themselves, because of the whole Daedra influence on them, they're not considered to be necromancer, like necromantically raised, because basically it's a curse / disease. What is interesting is that necromancers, extremely powerful necromancers, we're talking like liches, and the groups of them have been known to bind vampires. Potima the Wolf Queen, when you fight her in Skyrim, she has a group of vampires that are like her servants.
Mm-hmm.
And which is interesting because they are not connected to the other vampires in that hold at all. In fact, they've been just living underground in solitude, waiting for her return. This entire, like, the entire time and that's about, she's like earlier centuries of the Septim Empire, so that's about 700-ish years between games there. So
yeah, it's interesting that they call her the Wolf Queen, and she has the ability to also raise the dead. Because some of these dog variations have done some necromantic techniques, like Anubis, I believe, did when he rose Osiris too. So yeah.
Yeah, the Wolf Queen thing, it's more just because she was the Queen of Solitude, and that's like Solitude's thing. But she was actually using a necromantic army to like fight the Empire for a while. Basically, she had a claim to the throne. It was a dynastic dispute. She tried to claim the throne using her son, and used an army of undead to try to like take it. And she failed ultimately because she's bad, and that's how most of these stories that you're not involved in the games go. But you put her soul finally, like there's a group of necromancers trying to like raise it and bind her, and then you kill them mid ritual, and her soul escapes, and then you have to like go back and finish it.
Yeah, I find it also interesting, the thing about the soul cairn as well, where anybody that goes into a deal with basically was the ideal masters, essentially, where they where they do necromancy, and they basically get the whole consequence of this. It's like a genie's wish, where there's some weird thing that happens, and they do it to just trick you, to soul trap you as well, essentially.
The ideal masters are interesting because they were a group of mages who carved out that realm. And then basically the soul cairn became this place where anyone in black soul gems souls go. Now another interesting thing about them is that like they transform themselves into like giant crystals. And they kind of rule the soul cairn in a very hands-off way, but I think they're just using it like a battery. For their own, but they were most undoubtedly necromancers prior to that.
Oh yeah, and then they just transform themselves into a crystal, which you can do. There is a darker side to the crystalline body form where it's more neutral, where you can actually just transform yourself into that form to make sure you're a permanent conduit as well. You have the crystalline body form, which allows you to channel more of the universal energies, but it can go the other way with necromancy, and it can go the other way with basically channeling any energies as well, and creating your own realms out of it as well. There's a lighter side where, like when I channeled Frank Frazetta, he told me about creating whole worlds and whole universes. Isn't there? There's the darker side where you take a whole universe, like what we were discussing off call about Dormammu creating his own universe. Essentially, you can do that. That's how the Ideal Masters did it, as well as in the same kind of technique.
So moving beyond zombies, because basically they're just undead with their flesh still on, not
Mhm.
like zombie virus type thing for modern like zombie
Yeah, this
myth.
is more magic, like with the skeletons. Yeah, this is more
Yeah.
magic. Yeah.
Now we're getting into skeletons, and I mean
Yeah.
skeletons are skeletons. Well, one of the fun things that somebody has made for they made mods where like now the skeletons are accurate to the race that they're meant to be, which is kind of cool. So like the mod makes it so there's Argonian skeletons and Khajiit skeletons and elf skeletons, and this picture is clearly taken with that because with that mod installed, because that's a elf skull and that's a human skull.
Okay.
But skeletons, depending on the game, they can be very strong or very weak. So in Skyrim, they're fairly weak. It takes like one hit with a sword, and they'll just fall into a bunch of bones. In Oblivion, they're fairly decent enemies. The worst game that they're in is Daggerfall, where like they are for some reason just absurdly strong. Skeletons. Now, I just got one picture of skeletons, but skeletons have been known to like wear armor and stuff in these games, kind of like that Raid Shadow Legends ad that everybody sees, where there's that one skeleton that's wearing armor.
Mhm.
The
I believe the Draugr fall under this category too.
I'm gonna get into them later. They're their own weird thing.
Oh, okay.
Basically, the skeletons, though, it's a skeleton that's been raised by a necromancer. It's what you'd expect. Some skeletons, if they have magical ability in life, can you still use magic. Usually it's not nearly as strong as it would have been in life, though, because the magic usually has to have like it draws off life force, so something raised doesn't really have life force, so it's not nearly as potent. Now we're getting into the Lich. So basically, a Lich is a necromancer who takes a magical object, puts their soul into it. Then, over the course of time, they will begin the Lich transformation, and they'll basically turn into something akin to like just a super powerful undead creature. Their arcane ability shoots up, and if the object is that their consciousness, like their soul, is in, is taken too far away from them or destroyed during this process, they'll just cease to exist and be cast to the void.
Mm.
If the transformation's complete, their soul is kind of then like malleable again, like it can go back to them if they want it to. But liches are some of the strongest enemies you'll face in these games. Their arcane potential's absurd. Metamarco became a lich. He was like the first lich. Now, not really the first, but like the first lich is what they call him. Because we know some of the Alien kings became liches. We know that there were ancient liches. The dragon priests are a type of lich, but they're not the same type of lich, basically. Basically, dragon priests play the role of lich in Skyrim, but they're essentially a lich, but they have a little bit more lore to them than just that. Because there's like worshipped energy behind them.
They fueled themselves on the worship energy. Yes.
Yeah. The liches are also very powerful when it comes to like just they can raise multiple undead around them at will. Normal necromancers can't do a ton by themselves. They're also like lich kings are like a thing where like you will have liches that carve out small kingdoms. And this was mostly in areas like High Rock, where they're fairly disjointed. And when the empires aren't around, parts of the places do fall to Lich Kings. They're rare, normally, but they do happen. They're absurdly powerful, but essentially they are a necromancer that has made themselves into an undead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find this interesting where he said they put their soul into an object. You know, I've seen in masks before. I've seen a lot of possessed masks. It's like the movie Mask where you know Loki's consciousness or residual is supposed to be in the mask. It's kind of similar where, well, like I used to have this Balinese mask that had a gargoyle consciousness in it, but he drifted away, and it became a bad conduit at that point. I had to get rid of it. But the point is, you can put a soul into an object, any object. It can be, especially with a face. It could be a mask, a doll, anything like that. You can bind beings to it. But in the case of the Lich, yeah, you can displace that so that you still have that connection and that control and aren't feral, like a feral bottom feeder, essentially, without a soul. But at the same time, like you're not a zombie, but at the same time, yeah, you could be able to, without that soul taking that space, be able to fill it with all those absurdly, powerful arcane energies. So that's another truth. Would it conjure into something this powerful? That's an I don't know. I've never actually seen that, but it makes sense that you would be able to fill that space and then be able to channel that much energy. And also back to the ideal masters, the same thing where they turn themselves into crystals. That you could bring about a large amount of energy and conjure and bring about, like in Star Wars, that one character that was able to manipulate the Force so much he was able to control life or death. It's kind of something similar to
Darth
that.
Nihilus. Yeah, he's basically a Force Lich. Yeah.
Yeah.
He Liches actually, to prove that Liches are some of the strongest enemies in these game series. One of the main enemies in the Elder Scrolls Blades, like the mobile game, is a Lich. It's an alien king Lich, I believe. So
that's interesting. Yeah, they crossed it over into the Star Wars universe, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
these are interchangeable. Yeah,
Liches appear all over fantasy fiction. They're big in like Dungeons and Dragons as well as just like an enemy type. Moving on, we have the maid category where where the necromancers themselves collect parts and then build an abomination and raise it. This is a bone colossus, which is essentially just a bunch of bones strapped together to make like a hulking beast. These usually guard like vampire areas as well as necromancer hideouts. They're a common enemy type in the Elder Scrolls Online when dealing with necromancy.
This is interesting too, like what I was saying before about the poltergeist energies. This also like strapping things together and creating things. It's just like in Oblivion and the Shivering Isles, where there's that guardian to the Shivering Isles where you create a new one. It's the same concept essentially. Also, technologically, if you go on the technological side of it, you can do this holographically too, like in Star Trek, for instance, where they have the holograms. You also had this in New Vegas, where Elijah was using the holograms of the Sierra Madre. You can easily interchange the magical side and pass it into the technological because, like, I've had these visions for months. This has come out of nowhere of me in this environment where I'm not only creating a holographic, like set of either droids or zombies or what have you, but I was actually able to make it so they could cross out of like a holodeck type of situation. I'm not sure where that came from. I was picking up on a real concept. This is obviously building up to this episode, but this, you can piece a bunch of stuff together and give it life like this. Now, in binding rituals, it's something similar where, like I did this recently. I mentioned this on a conspiracy sector episode as well, where it was about magic and witchcraft, where I had to take a crystal. And again, this goes back to the crystals as well. Take bones of an animal, antlers, cleansing, materials such as amber, frankincense, myrrh, some of my clearing liquids, alcohol, all of it, bind it in a red cloth, and then basically draw in that entanglement and energy of whatever I wanted to bind to it. It's not the same as this, but it's of a similar technique when you're trying to conjure and then trap and or create. It's a similar, you could easily morph that ritual over here trying to trap into something like this if you had a high enough psionic ability, telekinetic, or magical ability, and knew some of the different alchemical energies and components of the pieces and parts you're putting in there, of like what would go together and what wouldn't into a perfect alchemy. Like if you're making liquids or combining stones, or if I make the orgone pieces, it's all alchemy essentially. And so, yeah, that takes a high level of that type of alchemic and magical knowledge as well.
Another form of this kind of thing is what's called a flesh atronach. Now, flesh atronachs are basically just a bunch of flesh that. Now, they're not an atronach. I don't know why they use the word atronach, because atronach really is like a conjured being from Oblivion. These are actually a bunch of flesh that's been molded into a creature in the same sort of way, and then been animated. You can actually see in this picture that it's been sewn together in places. And because it's made, they usually incorporate things like weapons into the arms, and they're used to guard places like for the worm cult generally. Usually only deep necromancers make things like this. You actually do get to make one in the Elder Scrolls Online main quest line because you need to like do something, and you make like a little one, and the guy who's like flipping sides from the bad side to the good side is like, "Oh, it's your cute first flesh atronach. We can make a necromancer of you yet." Yeah, but basically it's just that same concept, but it's animated flesh, and for some reason they give it a face, which is kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it's really creepy like that. The other Antronachs like Fire and Ice and Rock and all of those are essentially the same type of conjuring. Now, also Rock Golems. The original premise behind this was like a Jewish type of ritual,
Yeah,
I understand it,
yeah,
where they conjured this. And what I found out is the technique of the Rock Golem was to create a guardian like this. It's the same identical premise, but I found out some spun off and became their own life forms. They became their own elemental races. Some didn't, some did. Some conjurings can start out at this, and the race called the Forbosi took it to a genetic level. If they found out certain races and elemental forces were becoming a strong spiritual force, they helped them evolve quicker genetically. But with a case like the Antronox, it's essentially all the same thing where you're conjuring and creating a guardian out of some elemental force. In this case, it's flesh, but then you also have earth, air, fire, water as well that you can bring into this. And obviously, there's metal involved in this because of his hands and everything. In Japan, they have metal as an element as well. So this makes sense that they would have those weapon accoutrements on him, not just for defense, but for the element of metal as well. Yeah.
And the use of like necromantically raised things as guards in the Elder Scrolls isn't new. I mean, the Dark Brotherhood does it at their sanctuaries often. Yeah, this is not a new concept, but these guys are basically strictly deep necromantic cult kind of things. Not even vampires usually make this kind of stuff. So I've even heard tell that they've like Daedra consciousnesses can be put in these, and that makes them even more powerful because that opens up magic for them.
Okay.
Yeah, but
you can do that. You can bring in demons and such and fill the space too. Yeah.
Ultimately, the only reason why this isn't an atronach in like the proper sense is because an atronach in the Elder Scrolls is a summoned creature from another plane of existence, whereas this is made and just animated.
Okay, yeah, the others are more elemental. Like there's elemental planes, like what you see in the Champions of Norath game series, where there's elemental plane layers. It's like that. That's actually true, where there's different elemental plane layers too.
Yeah, no, it's actually stated that atronachs come from planes of oblivion that usually have to do with their specific element. That are usually independent from the overlords, but they'll pledge their support to them. And that's why there's like the cold flame atronachs in Molag Bal's plane, because he actually spread his plane of oblivion and encompassed a plane of oblivion where these things lived, and then corrupted them with his own cold harbor energies.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So now we're moving past the whole like made creatures. We're going to go in to talk about the dragon priests and the dragon cult for a second, because they have their own version of necromancy that's bit different. So the dragon priests in life would have looked a lot like they look like in death, but in life, and they built these big structures where it's basically implied that these are ancient Nord cities that now are just tombs. And that dragon priests were basically the people chosen by Alduin and the dragons to rule over the populations of these population centers. Because they were basically the kings there, they started to be worshipped as like demigods, where the dragons were like the real gods to these people. as a result, they started getting, and they had great arcane knowledge. They were usually the best of the best. Like Mirak. Mirak was a dragonborn that became a dragon priest, and confidently was like, yeah, if I wanted to get rid of Alduin, I could have. Then he dealt with Daedra, and his whole story changes. But ultimately, these people were basically given this power by the dragons, and they were to rule over the populations, and then they became worshipped. Well, they put magic over these locations that would then become tombs, and that magic is the kind of magic that will allow Draugr to raise from the dead.
Okay.
There was a Breton who is researching Draugr, who in just by like living in the tomb for a while was able to like the Draugr not really like kind of became accustomed to it and wouldn't attack her, and she was able to witness how basically the Draugr are animated to keep the tomb in order. So if there's ever a time when the dragons return and take over, that dragon priest can still be there for them.
Okay.
In fact, she even in the book and game, it talks about how she saw them like cleaning the tomb and repairing damage from just the ancient days, and how the dragon priest is always kind of in slumber, but how the Draugr wake up, and then the Draugr are also a defense mechanism, and how even embalmed like people that get put in there later can fall under this and be controlled. And there doesn't always have to be a dragon priest on site. There can also just be like this magic is placed over the location, not just they don't need to be there. That's why there's tombs.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's why in game there's tombs where there's no dragon priest, but the Draugr is still like up and walking around.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And they're no longer there, but the magic is still in play with the Draugr, keeping them going. What I was going to say was also sometimes there'll be a force in a tomb like this or a place like this that is also embodied in Skyrim. Whereas, like when you're in Solstheim, for instance, not only with Mirak, whether he's making the people excavate his tomb and actually open it up to where he can get out. There was that other one where you go with that dark elf to try to excavate this tomb out, and it's actually a dragon priest manipulating him to dig it out. Yeah. This actually happened in real life. I came to find out that there was an energy collection unit. This happens with energy collection units where Orions will sit at the bottom and influence the people above to actually open the tube up to the air again and open it up to the atmosphere again and the sun and the stars, because they need sometimes that to power the machines. So this happened at the city of Troy, I found out many years ago. Even though people know the general history of Troy, I found out there was an actual alien or an Orion that was on inside the walls of Troy that was actually creating the whole war to begin with, actually conjured the entire thing to begin with. And I found out the reason why Achilles brought the Myrmidon soldiers with him was for that reason. It was to actually try to get to the Myrmidon were trying to get to this. People, that's like a side thing I channeled, associated with the mythology surrounding for. That's not, I don't always associate it completely with what people know as the history, but also I found out the archaeologists that blew up the structure that we know as Troy to dig down to the original culture that was there. I found out there was an energy collection unit that the being under there wanted it opened up, wanted it spread open to where he could.
Do you know the story about that? Do you know like the archaeology story about that?
Not completely. I just knew why he did.
Dug right through the layers where Troy would have actually have been.
Yeah, and he went all the way through it to get to the bottom. Yeah.
And, he went right through the layers where Troy would have been, historically speaking, like time wise, like, because in archaeology it's all about layers, and you can tell the time frame based on these layers. Yeah, he would have went. I think he went to about 600 years before the events the time frame where we think that war would have happened.
Oh, okay, yeah, and the reason being is because I found out he opened this chasm up in there because certain energies had to escape from there, and also some had to be brought in. I found out energetically. I wondered why he was so compelled to just haphazardly do this.
he was also just a very bad archaeologist all
Yes, he
around.
was. Yes, he was. Yeah.
He excavated multiple places and just did they because he was a rich German guy that was like, oh, I'm paying for all this, so it's mine.
Oh
So
yeah, he was an asshole too. I'm just saying this particular thing though was this type of situation.
yeah, no,
Like,
he's definitely the kind of person I would have said would be like Cabal.
oh yeah,
And
he definitely would have released that. Also, the Bosnian pyramids was the same thing too. I came to find out.
yeah, he
Where I
actually
hmm?
he actually famously dressed up his wife in jewels taken out of like that Bronze Age Greek tombs. Like he put her in all this jewelry that came out of it, and there's a picture of her on
Oh
out there.
Lord, yeah, that I didn't know, but that makes sense given the fact he's Cabal. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me.
Also,
So.
there's a there's a big theory out there that like one of the biggest finds that he has the mask of Agamemnon
Hmm.
is a fake because none of the other like burial masks from that period that have been found look nearly as detailed as this one. And it's like highly speculated that he may have had this thing made and put it in there and then was like, oh, look what we found.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, where they would literally set the stage to actually find these particular
Yeah.
things, and then also desecrate these particular tombs, because that's how Cabal works. They do this. Also, one thing I wanted to bring up on the Bosnian pyramids, there was an energy collector there, and there's a good site there that's much older, from like Paleolithic period. What happened was, when this was starting to be excavated, it reminds me of that scene where, when you first go to Solstheim, everybody's being mind controlled to excavate Murak's
Mm-hmm.
tomb. When I saw a video, and I can't find this now, I wish I could, or I would attach it to this, but there was this guy that he was digging, or they were digging the pyramid out, and he looks at the camera and goes, I really don't know why I'm doing this. And that was a clue to me, that it was just like them digging out Mirak's tomb, where they're going, we must dig out this is to our Lord, sort of thing. It reminded me freakishly of that. There were parallels between those two. And I came to find out that some of the energies that were there, that were strictly Orion, that were trying to come out, just like with Troy. It was the same thing. It was just deeper with the Bosnian periods. It was much further deep. There's a pit there that has this weird energy there. And I sensed energy collection and vampiric stuff there immediately. So it was like, not all of it. I'm not saying the whole thing. I'm saying this one section this guy was digging out was just like Mirak's tomb. So I know I diverted a little bit with the Troy thing, but it had a
Mm-hmm.
parallel in there with
Yeah.
the Kabbalistic Luciferian magic in there. So yeah.
So after death, the dragon priests would have been embalmed in the same way that the Draugr are. Um, and they basically became like mummies. And this is Draugr are a real concept in like Viking mythology. That in the tombs, the ancient warriors will wake up and kick you out if you're trying to rob them, basically.
Mm-hmm,
That, and that during the winter they will leave the tombs and will kill. But the dragon priests, for their own sake, then basically become like a lich. Their soul thing, we don't know if their soul was ever taken out of their body and put into an object. It's implied that it might be in the masks that they have. What we do know is that their magic is not like a lich in the way where they get a lot of their power from the worshipped status that they had, because when you're worshipped, you're able to pull on that energy, and we know for a fact that that's what they're doing, and that if like that ancient worship magic is allowing them to sustain themselves in a way that's lich like, but isn't the definition of lich that fits the other definitions of lich.
Okay, yeah, this actually makes sense with the mask, because it's like it goes back to that goofy movie, The Mask, where there was like a soul energy or residual, or say a magical spell or incantation or template that was put on that object. And say also, if you kill one of these guys in the game, you could literally take the mask and use the abilities that they bestowed on that,
Mm-hmm.
with the different magical abilities. So that actually makes sense. So It's also within the different elements like earth, air, fire, water, things of that nature. So it would be a manipulation or bastardization or weaponization of the elements, as well as a bastardization of natural law as well. So if you want to put it that way. But like with the mask, that actually makes sense that they would put it all into a mask like that. So if they were to die, you claim that you could literally have the residuals of those abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the other theories is that the mask was kind of all the dragon priests for that location would have been named the same thing because it's the mask. Like the dragon didn't want there to be an appearance of a death. Mm-hmm. So when one guy would die, the mask would just move to the next guy. And that's why there are maskless dragon priests in the higher levels in Skyrim.
Mm.
Basically, if you're just so good, they'll replace like the Draugr Death Lords or whatever at the end with like a maskless dragon priest that's usually more powerful than the masked ones, because the masked ones you can fight at any level, whereas these ones are only appear when you're like very high level.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, where they were able to kind of just displace the soul or kind of still incorporate it in some fashion and not displace it to an object, that would make them vulnerable. So that would make them more powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. They're but that's, and then we'll talk about the Draugr. Basically the magics put over these tombs raise the Draugr. They're basically like Viking mummies, even in histories that tell about them in our world. They're basically mummified people. And the thing about them in Skyrim is, they will continue to maintain the tombs, and bodies that are prepared and put in tombs even after can be awoken as Draugr. Like, even if they had no connection to that ancient past, but the tomb has that magic on it, they will be able to be risen as
it would saturate, because energies can permeate and saturate objects. Like when I've been getting rid of objects in our house, I had to differentiate between, okay, what was the catalyst or linchpin object and what was just soaking up the energies like a sponge. And in this case, the environment would be the sponge, and then it would leach that energies to any of the dead bodies. So it would be like a fallout, essentially, fallout to the rest of it. So that actually makes sense. It's not always a smart bomb. If you have something like a Draugr Lord, of course, some of that magic would permeate and mix with anything else around. So it's not necessarily a complete smart bomb. You would have to quarantine it to one thing, but I've seen quarantining techniques for clearing properties and for conjurings, where you quarantine and conjure in something so that you can kind of control it, or quarantine and clear a property if you're trying to quarantine a demon. It's not 100%. It's more like somewhere around 80%, and at 80, 85%, maybe 90 if you're lucky. But it's not 100%. I wish it were, but I think that's impossible, and it would still permeate an area, a building, or a population. So this actually makes sense.
Yeah, and Draugr, though they can be controlled by necromancers, they do hold necromancers in the same kind of hostility that they would any intruder initially. And it seems that you'd have to just knock down the Draugr, kill it, however you want to say it, and then raise it again for it to be your own servant if you are a necromancer, because the magics over the tomb are in control of it before. You can't shoot your spell at one that's risen at the place and automatically control it. You'd have to still knock it down again and then bind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. You would have to disconnect it from that permeated saturation or saturated energy in the area, and then make it your own with your own torsion field, essentially, or essentially your own magic. So that makes sense. Disconnect, cutting the cord, and reappropriating. And that's a real thing too, where you can steal things from other wizards, reappropriate it, and use it on them too. That takes a very high level of skill to do that, though. Interestingly,
also, when you kill a Draugr, they don't fall into a pile of ash, whereas most other risen things do. Now, if you raise a Draugr that you've already killed, then it does. But initially, Draugr just kind of, when you kill them, they just fall to the floor like a corpse. And ultimately speaking, most likely it would wake up again later.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. If you get enough of those saturated energies, like if you were to kill it and leave it there, those saturated energies would just permeate it, and it would soak it up like a sponge and just bring itself back. Yeah, it'll bring it back.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten through that, we're going to talk a bit about the most famous necromancer who ever lived in the Elder Scrolls. And that, of course, is Metamarco, who we've talked about a few times on this program in the Sigic Order and the Elder Scrolls Online and the Oblivion episodes, because he plays a very large role, and he is the king of basically he's the first necromancer, first lich. We've gone through how he started out with the Sigic Order, and then he left because he got kicked out for doing too much necromancy, and him and Vanis Galarian both started at the Sigic Order, became ultimate rivals, and Vanis basically thought that he beat him, but he didn't, and then he made his pact with Molag Bal, but he was really always trying to like mantle Molag Bal and become a new god. Molag Bal caught him and ended their agreement. Then the Vestige has the choice to like free him or like leave him in Molag Bal's torture pits, which regardless he escapes at some point. And in Oblivion, in Daggerfall, that is, he can. Well, we'll get into that after. In Oblivion, there's a version of him that comes back and is like making problems for the Mages Guild, and you have to go and defeat him. And we will get into now how Metamarco became a god through necromancy. So, Metamarco became a lich. Now, he became a lich in a way that didn't like make him look decrepit. He was like a lich while he was still alive, sort of thing, where like he retained his being. We know that in Oblivion, I think once you kill him, I've never actually played the quest fully. I'm in the quest line now. When you kill him, he does turn into a lich, and you have to fight him a second time, I think. But yeah, he becomes a lich, and when we talked about the Dragon Break in Daggerfall, how multiple timelines were created, one of the choices was to give the Metamarco the energy of the Numidium. Through that, he basically willed himself out of existence and becomes a god. The god of necromancy. Well, the timeline where he didn't do that is the version of Metamarco that you fight in Oblivion. Both of them exist simultaneously because when a Dragon Break happens, every possible thing happens and then folds back into itself. So there's two. You kill the version of him, but the version of him that's the god Metamarco is still there. What the god Metamarco becomes, this is actually his cult, the worm cult, or the basically that's like the cult of necromancy that he like starts, and all the necromancers that then follow him as a god still use this symbol. He becomes the necromancer's moon, and in Oblivion, the only way to get black soul gems is to do a ritual during the necromancer's moon. And black soul gems before Skyrim were highly entwined with necromancy, where you do a ritual on the necromancer's moon, get black soul gems, which basically involve corrupting a grand soul gem into a black soul gem. And then it can take a human soul instead of a non-human soul. It's sort of the same, a similar ritual to the one that you can stop or allow to be finished in Skyrim to create the Black Star or the Azura Star thing. But that one, because it was like a Daedric artifact, they had to corrupt it from the inside, and that's why you fight that necromancer on the inside of the artifact.
Yeah, to clear it out. Yeah, essentially,
But yeah, so now he's like a god of necromancy, but he really doesn't have any agency, and he can't really control much, but he can do the necromancer's moon thing.
Okay.
And
I find that. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go.
Oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but yeah, I remember seeing there was this video someone did of the Azura Star, where they wanted to show people. Ironic, this was very interesting. I don't really think they realized how prophetic this was, where this was essentially the geometry of how the game was built. They were showing when you back away from it.
Mm-hmm.
In Azura Star, of course, you have the guy that's in the middle. When you back away from this star, it becomes a sphere, and
Mm-hmm.
that's essentially like the soul trap spheres. Also, the ships that had the little guy that float around them, that you can see the little miniature spaceships, or the orbital ships, or elementals. It's similar. It's similar in nature, and I find it also very, very fascinating that when you said it was the Dragon Break version of Manamarca, where he's the timeline where he doesn't become the god, in the timeline he does, and then they fuse back together, mantle back together. That's like a miniature Mandela effect. And we talked about the Numidium before, where it's essentially, I found out it's essentially how the Ark of the Covenant worked in the past, where it was not, it was used in warfare. And I found out it could do something very similar, time break, like the Numidium. So I'm thinking somebody was depicting that. But I find it interesting where it was the two timeline versions fused back together, where you could mantle something that was accomplished over here here, and that's essentially taking from the multiverse or a Dragon Break timeline and refusing it. It's I find that very, very interesting. You can also take abilities from other parts of the multiverse. You can also get interferences from other parts of the multiverse in the same way, where it's basically like Spock said in Star Trek, the infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So it's where like just like also in Multiverse of Madness, where Wanda says there's a solution to every problem. So in this case, say if you didn't accomplish something here, somewhere in the multiverse, a version of you has accomplished it. So therefore, you can bring that into here. It's not advisable, mind you, but you can actually open that door and actually do that. You can also, in the movie Multiverse of Madness, they show a concept called incursions, and
Mm-hmm.
where even a footprint from our universe into another one can drag in some kind of entanglement that could collapse reality. Even like spitting on the sidewalk or walking. I don't think the multiverse is quite that fragile, but they had a real concept in there. Star Trek did it too, whereas Kirk had to pass through a corridor to get from our universe to an antimatter universe, where there was a guy in both universes that when they'd clash, it would cause an incursion.
Mm-hmm.
So they were two opposites, but they were the one hated the other one, that the other one existed. He couldn't handle the other one existed when he discovered the multiverse. So it was it's something very similar to this with the Dragon Break, where you can actually conjure things from other universes that could suit here, but there are also consequences. It's also very similar to the conjunction of the spheres in Witcher, where these beings were coming from different worlds and different dimensional
Mm-hmm.
states. But this is more multiverse oriented, where you can actually bring something in and fuse a certain timeline in with yourself. The same goes also with getting rid of past life junk as well, where you see me rewrite a narrative. And what I'm doing is I'm connecting somebody to a better energy within their own oversoul library, which encompasses the multiverse. So it's all inclusive, but this is more of the darker version or flip side of this. But that's what I see Manny Marcos having done, having both versions of himself like that, and becoming a
Yeah,
lich after you kill him too. Yeah.
and
So
the thing that makes sense with the whole Metamarco split thing that happens is you. What we need to remember is even though Skyrim is 200 years between from Oblivion, the
mhm.
first 4 Elder Scrolls games all took place in like a 15-year period.
Oh wow. Okay.
So the events of Daggerfall are not too far off from when you are in Oblivion. And so when this split had happened, the version of Metamarco that didn't become a god simply just looked for another way to become more powerful. That's
Okay.
Metamarco's entire thing. He just wants to become more powerful and eventually become a god. So in that timeline, he's trying to weaken the Mages Guild, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So not timeline, but like that version of Metamarco is basically messing with the Mages Guild and trying to spread necromantic power around like he's returned in some grand fashion, which he didn't. But little does he know he's already a god. Because that version of him is realistically an alternate reality version of Metamarco.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that became a god. Because all those basically Dragon Break is weird because every event that possibly could have happened in the Dragon Break time frame is then folded into the main universe. So it is technically a different version of Metamarco. And when you kill him, there's no evidence that he rejoins the other one.
It
but he
just
met.
said it was a permanent split, but it's still the same person. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very like they started at one point, but it's a permanent split most likely between them. We don't know if maybe the God consciousness Manamarco can pull that other one to him afterward. That could be true, but we don't know anything about the God consciousness Manamarco. He's not, but it's not really been talked about in any
Mm-hmm.
way, shape, or form. And the very little bit that we do know comes from the fact that we know that the Necromancer's Moon was a new phenomenon that basically started right after the Dragon Break. And there's really no other reason for a necromantic anything to happen right after that Dragon Break other than if Metamarco's version of him became a god, made this into whatever.
Yeah, exactly. What I find interesting also is some people, are harassed by oh, somebody didn't want me to say this part, harassed by what they see as a dark being, but it could be another version of you from the multiverse. Essentially, in the movie Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, there's a version of him killing other versions of him in the multiverse. The same goes for guides too. There could be another version, may not even look anything like that is it could be on another planet too in the multiverse, and it's just a different way that version of you evolved, another expression of the oversoul. People call this layers of dimensions, where sometimes you have to kind of act as a guide for somebody else in that set of dimensions. I used to do that. It got very tiresome after a while for me personally. And then I found out it was being forced also by a darker version of myself to try to connect to this and create back doors into the lives of those other versions as well to try to dominate. Like what you and I were saying off recording about Dormammu being a version of Doctor Strange, where he just evolved into this godlike figure and destroyed everything in that reality and was also trying to conquer and destroy and control everything in other reality. It's the same thing, infinite diversity and infinite combination. So that actually makes sense with Manny Marco, how this version would be so drastically different than here. It'd be an interesting game if they would bring the God version of Manamarco into it, just like it would be an interesting movie if they would bring the Dormammu version of Doctor Strange into the origin story of that. So it'd be interesting if they would do that with Manamarco and show the God version of him and how the Dragon Break literally worked and split that off and kept this going, or if he reabsorbed this version, which is also true. They can use these other versions as puppets and then reabsorb them like servants. Like you see again, like Dormammu, when Doctor Strange says, "Take your servants from the earth," he takes all of these the people that he had servants left, like Mads Mikkelsen's character and the rest of them in that, where he just turns them into these zombified figures and then draws them back into the dark dimension. So
Mm-hmm.
that very thing could genuinely take place even from another version. People always think, oh, something's haunting my house. It could be your own projected poltergeist energy. Oh, there's a demon harassing me. It could very well be a version of you from the multiverse. Weird concept for people to understand, but if you understand the infinite diversity and infinite combinations theory and basically foundation, it's actually a possibility. Like you could even have a reptilian version of yourself that comes back to try to harass you, and you think it's a completely different entity and it's evil, which it is, but it could have a totally different set of genetics, a totally different set of energy, everything, but it could still be within your oversoul's purview of understanding and library. That's why your oversoul has connected to different dark things in not only in this linear history, but in the breadth of the multiverse. So it can get, if you try to get into multiversal physics, your head will explode. But it's like, but it's basically if you go back to Star Trek, it's basically Spock said the phrase infinite diversity and infinite combination. So if they add this into, since they have added this into Elder Scrolls, it would be fascinating to also see the alternate versions of different characters if they integrate the multiverse physics into it. At least I think so. Anyway,
That would be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
What I mean, that's kind of all the information I have for today. So if you want to channel, or if you want to just tell the story of what we dealt with before recording,
Okay.
because it's
So I'll do
applicable.
that too. I didn't know if you wanted me to do that. So
No, that's fine because it's not like too personal. But
okay, yeah, the physics of it. It's interesting how this synchronicity lined up. I'll bring Isaac wanted to come through too, but I'll do this first. The reason I was keeping your name out of it is I didn't think you
Yeah.
wanted that out there, but it
No,
was
it's because there's no like super personal information involved.
okay. Yeah, this was actually quite fascinating. Well, not to you, Ryan, but as I've had this happen to myself as well, where I came to find out the reason that Ryan here was getting like attachments, getting had a demon possession that was attracted to him from a historic site. Also had a satyr that was trying to interrupt the whole thing. There was another version of him from the multiverse that looked like this desiccated Orion version, a Fomorian with a hood. And this can happen. Joanna and I noticed this, there were versions of ourselves. We saw in a vision sequence that were holding hands with each other, but they were like Orion Gray slash Fomorian pointed ear elf looking versions. Looked like Manamarco, but with like a bulbous head. So yeah, I could see this happening since the Orions broke through our space time. They were another version of us from their reality, essentially. Just a more mutated form of that essentially went down the AI route and all their life force was essentially gone. And they became vampires, and that's why they had the vampire contagion. In this, though, it was essentially a being that was oppressing you, Ryan, and basically forcing you to remember things not only from your SSP memory set, but connecting to other things in the multiverse, like what I was saying before, trying to reach out and grab energies from different areas by using you as a conduit, like a tree branch or a set of roots. And that can happen. So that I don't know if you want to explain more, but that was basically the nutshell of it, right?
I mean that's good enough. Everything else
Okay.
has. It's just I caught onto it in a way that was like kind of weird because I was able to sort of jump him at times in an altered state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. And it happened to me too, where I would be in a dream sequence, like what was said in Multiverse of Madness, where dreams were the windows to the multiverse, which is true. There was a one in particular. I won't go all the way into the Multiverse of Madness recordings. We got a ton of recordings on the Multiverse of Madness I have yet to publish. The explanations of like the infinite diversity, infinite combinations foundation of it. But there was literally a version of myself that I would literally jump into. And then this darker version was literally killing people and eating them. This was something I encountered when I was a teenager. It's like, okay, why is this version a cannibal? Why am I a cannibal in this? Why am I killing people, chopping their head off? And this is again, there's a darker version that went into that type of magic. One more version I will say, because this could take 2-3 hours to explain the whole thing out. Real fascinating. This was a very fascinating version of the multiverse, where I and this friend of mine and her son jumped into this one universe where it was nighttime and I could see where I used to live in Lincoln, Nebraska, on Hartley Street, but in the Belmont neighborhood, in that universe, all the houses looked like this weird colonial mix of architecture, but brick, like red brick. And I remember this version, he had a remote in his hand, was able to jump universes like in the show Slider. Well, I open this other portal and I see it's daylight, but I'm on a beach setting. And I walk up to this one guy. He is a version of myself, but he's black. He's a black person, but he's obviously me. I could see the same facial features. And not like he's related. He looked like me, but dark skin. And we walked up to, I was literally like dream walking, like in the movie. I was dream walking inside this person as I was sleeping, this version of me. And this friend of mine was basically saying, maybe we should go back. Maybe she was nervous, didn't like it. And her son was nervous too. Walked into this scenario and I walked up to this guy who looked like he was a construction worker or he was like a construction foreman or something like that. And I walked up to him and he turned and looked at me, greeted all three of them first and said hello to him. Then he saw me. Then he literally saw me as I was looking through this version. He goes, "Oh man, you too. Hey, what's up?" He was greeting me, and so he was capable of seeing if anybody was attached to anybody or if there was possessions or attachments, just like I usually do. He was capable of the same thing. And I thought that was very fascinating when I ran into that, and them saying dreams were the gateway to the multiverse. I thought that was very fascinating. I know you haven't seen that particular movie yet. I do recommend it to people on aspects of the multiverse. I know that doesn't have to do with Doesn't seem like it has to do with necromancy, but you can pull energies from the multiverse and actually conjure certain things and bring them into our realm from those different universes and dimensions. So it does loosely kind of fit there, loosely, but it does fit. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Brian, but I can bring Isaac in if you want to do that.
Yeah, I'm good. You can bring
Okay.
Isaac.
I know it's been a complex subject, but yeah, I know
Yeah.
Isaac, you've been chomping at the bit here. All right. Okay. Okay. Benevolent Isaac. I don't want any creepy things. We've had some creepy things this morning. I don't want any other creepy things. So, I've been becoming very intolerant of creepy things coming into our house. So it's so yeah. I know you're not creepy. Well, maybe you are, Isaac, in your own way. But okay. Let's see. Let's see. He's like ha 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 ha, ha like that. He doesn't always react the same as if you throw an insult back at him, but. Mm. Okay, Isaac, go right ahead through the crystal, please. Oh, Jesus, did you have to do that? Okay. He like touched my chest and did this zap thing. Like, boom.
Mm.
So he'll do this periodically if he's wanting to creep me out, or he'll sit there while I'm trying to play a game and just stick a finger in my ear or something like that, doing stuff like this. So just to creep me out. So, and I know you do it again. I understand. Okay. Okay. Limit today. Why is the energy that kind of weird today? Looks calm, but it's still a bit of a surf. Okay. Okay, we can do that. And it's approaching Halloween. So by the time people see this episode, it'll be Halloween, but it's 10/22/22 today.
Hmm.
So it is approaching the Samhain or Samhain or Samhain time frame. It is very turbulent energies, and it seems like it's calmer. And it can be peaceful, but there is a big surf or a riptide as well. So, okay, Isaac? Yes, I'll shut up so you can come in. Yes. Okay. Oh, good God. Yes, what he's said is correct. Necromancy happens quite often. They also depicted in your show X-Files, where zombies could be contained by salt rings. This can actually happen with any conjured being. You can take different types of salt. I recommend mixes like he mix, whether it's just the different reds, whites, blacks, yellows, grays, all of it together to create a mix, even with other elements such as sulfur and bitumen, for instance, and even in some cases, graveyard dirt. And in that case, it constantly scrubs. That's not always recommended, mind you, because that's basically taking a haunted place and adding it in there. But it continues to move the particles in this. But what also could be left behind would be the dirt afterwards, after the salt melts. But then it melts away as well. What I want to say is this: is say if you do learn this technique of necromancy and your Luciferians, Cabal, Satanic sects, not all of them, have learned this technique mostly with animals, but your Luciferian cults have brought people back to actually send them out in society as drones as well. Science has done this too with like essentially a synth, like you've said in your Fallout series. But if you do it in a purely magical construct, you could control someone to be your eyes and ears, no different than a drone. It's easier for them to do this technologically, but you have the magical sects that are more purists, and they will literally kill someone to bring them back instead of having a Draco reptilian consume them. This is actually something they don't do as often. They would much rather appease the reptilians and appease the Orions. But every now and again, the Orions instruct them to send another one of these soulless beings out there. There are soulless beings walking around where a soul has been harvested, yet there is a vampiric being walking around that's virally infected or a soulless human. These are less common. These are more monsters. They would be sociopaths in your society. Your H.H. Holmes was one of these. He was also vampiric in nature and also very sadistic and psychopathic and sociopathic. But in this, you can actually do these rituals and imbue these different remains and these different objects with these energies, and even remove a soul and place it in an object. He has done this in a binding ritual to get rid of entanglements, the lighter side of the ritual, but the darker half of it is actually literally stealing someone's soul. This is what the Orions do when they do the soul harvests. This is why they incorporated harvest into religion, so that it was more acceptable within your religious communities. But I can go into questions if you like.
So the thralls that these groups make, do they have distinguishing factors that like would allow someone to know that that's what that thing is?
Yes, even though this can vary, they do have one distinguishing factor that is universal above all, is that they will have the undying focus on their target. They have literally a one track mind, or you would say a one trick pony. I'm not saying everybody that does this is this, but a distinguishing feature amongst all the thralls is they will literally die to do whatever the task is they've been programmed to do. It's not unlike some of the programming and magic that's out there currently with the mind control, but with this, they are literally a soldier, a servant that can be either done computer wise, again, technologically or magically, to be a complete servant. They will not hear you. They don't have a soul to hear you. You see, they do not have a voice of their own. They do not have a mind of their own. Their undying allegiance is a distinguishing factor.
Okay, so there's no reasoning with these things.
No, zero reasoning. You would literally have to kill one of these. Yes.
Okay. This kind of magic, it's got traditions that we know, like culturally speaking here. I would assume that a lot of smaller practitioners of this kind of magic are not how you'd say always in line with the cabal's sort of use of it. And I'm assuming that there are some, for lack of a better term, wizard fights between
Oh,
cabal
yes, most definitely.
agents and like practitioners, probably on a smaller localized scale.
You are most certainly correct in this, Ryan. There are these wizard fights all the time. There are magic being thrown on a continuous and constant basis, but these smaller practitioners aren't necessarily aligned with Cabal. But the Cabal is actually counting on that these people will experiment and do something stupid, and it will align with their agenda. You see, there's also a good side of this that will take down the Cabal eventually as well if you build up certain skills. Now, say with his binding ritual, for instance, eventually you can get to the stage where you can bind within a very small pocket size, coin size, or small stone. You would eventually get to that stage where you can fold the soul energy down into a teeny tiny space, even something that dances on the head of a pin. This would take an advanced amount of, let's just say, energetic muscle, even to the stage he himself or you yourself have gotten to in seeing things. It takes a lot more to get to that magical stage, but you are correct. There are wizards all over the place doing things of this nature. Now, in your political fight, for instance, say your election, this past presidential election, what happened in the months and the days building up to this election, where people were taking either political side and trying to curse each other. Even small time witches, small time warlocks, small time even necromancers that were trying to conjure demon energies and throw them at the different political opponents. This happened too, and he caught this in a session of his where he saw different witches cursing either side. For one, that's not going to work because there's powerful magics in the puppet show that's out there, mind control to keep the public focused on it. So therefore, the majority torsion field of all the people focused on it keep it in play, no matter what little magics are happening on the outside. The greater torsion field is the mind control magic taking place currently. In this, stepping outside of the comedy tragedy or order chaos puppet show, as he likes to call it, a bit wordy, but I'll take it. In this particular thing, you're having, say, as somebody in their apartment trying to cast a spell on your presidential candidates or any politician they don't like, for that matter. It will then bounce off of what is currently there, either deflect back or disperse around in the surrounding area and hit other areas or hit other people that may also be practitioners in these magical arts. Therefore, it can also start a fight amongst all these practitioners aiming at one another. Dark magicians aside, these other practitioners then will pick up on that singular one back here and focus back on this person. This has happened quite often, even since those times and even before that. But with different, say, presidential elections coming up, even the one in 2024, I can pretty much guarantee with absolute certainty there's going to be magical practitioners doing this same thing and falling into the same snare. Nothing says you can't learn about these things. Just alter your focus and know there's a point to some hexes, there's a point to some curses, there's a point to white magic, there's a point to dark magic. In some instances, there's a point to some of these things, but always stay with the good side of the magic, but also do not get involved in that clusterfuck, as it were, because it'll bounce back to you and cause a lot of backwash into your own home, and it'll get people, these magical practitioners, to fight with each other. So there's a lot of wizard on wizard magic going on. Yes.
Okay. Now to kind of mantle off the necromancy thing for a second, because I'm more interested now in like the wizarding aspects. Are the majority of these smaller time magical practitioners out there like people in religion, or is there an actual like Harry Potter-esque like society of wizard people that all like hang out together and have like their own areas that they like their own hidden society?
With absolute certainty, you are correct. It's exactly like you see in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, where literally you could walk through a pillar and you'd be in an alternate train station, or you could get into an elevator and be in an alternate building. It is exactly as you are seeing, even though J.K. Rowling was writing fiction with fictional characters, she was literally channeling, even unbeknownst to her, what was going on in the wizarding world. Like when he saw the leprechaun Brimble and his brother Brumard, when he showed him that even through inside mailboxes, inside of doorways, or inside little closets, there is a passage to another area. Even though there are portals that can open up in closets, portals that can open up, like of different doorways of different dimensions. The same exact thing is the same principle for these different areas, just like in Harry Potter. Your new Ver exists outside of the Vegas Strip the exact same way, where you can have a passage from the Strip over to this. This is why it feels like if you were to go to the Vegas Strip, like there's another city on top of a city. This is exactly true. London is a major hub for this. It has many beings that have been coming and going for centuries. Your city of London in particular has another version, almost like a version of itself that looks more like what you would expect from the wizarding world, or like Hogwarts, essentially, whereas it would look very much more like that than it does currently. This is where a majority of those beings are coming and going from that hub. Now you have Chrome's people that exist in their own pocket, or like where his soul was Torankal, with Chrome's people. This is they exist in their own pocket. That is slightly different, even though it is a parallel dimensional state. It is not a city on top of a city. You have Ver, which is its own pocket, but you have these passages like in Harry Potter, where it's this alternate mirror flip that then they could go over to Ver. You see the difference, yes?
Mm-hmm. So though there isn't like, because like you're talking about the stuff where like other races are. I'm saying, is there a society of wizards like the Harry Potter wizards that live kind of and like have the same dynamic that we do here, with that they would have with like Muggles and Harry Potter, that are only wizards that have their own like separate society from us in that same way, where it's just like hidden from the majority of the people, and they like have this their own school and stuff like that? Is that real?
Yes, that is absolutely real in that way, where literally they are separatist in that way, and would indeed wipe the memories of any Muggles that came, or no mages that came in contact with them. So that is 100% accurate.
And do they really interact in like the bigger scope of things, or do they like kind of even shun like the alien communication, or are they also just disbelieving of aliens for the most part?
They are not necessarily disbelieving of aliens. They have contact with them. They are also intertwined into some, and I mean only very few, of some of the treaties that are out there, to make sure that this is why they do the memory wipe. You see, where regular humans come in contact with them, and say a human drifts into that side, very much like the character in your Fantastic Beast series where they called him a nomad and they wanted to wipe his memory. It is very much the same thing. They don't care if they are good or bad or ugly or all in between. Their rules are quite strict on this, very much like you saw the president of the Magical Society in America in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It is exactly like that. They do not care if that person helped them. They're grateful. But at the same time, their rules are strict, keeping that strict line between Mage and no Mage or Muggle and magical lineages. It is exactly like depicted.
Okay, so unlike in Harry Potter, where like someone who has latent like has magical ability, but is in like the Muggle world fully, like they have Muggle family. Well, I'm using that terminology just because it's easier.
Mhm.
They wouldn't include them in that society just because there's been a divide there so long now.
You are correct. They that person would have to find their way to them either intuitively or investigatively in some fashion. And it's not necessarily, it's kind of like in your Men in Black movies where one character was able to find them. It doesn't mean that they would automatically let you in, sort of thing. Now, you have your other groups like your Witcher type group, and you have your monster hunters, you have your other wizards, but then you have this specific governing body of that and magical society, like in your Harry Potter. Like, say, if you or himself crossed into that area, they would recognize you. They would recognize you for what you did and have done here, even now in these conversations. But would you be able to stay? No. And I know this seems cruel in its application, but there would have to be more extenuating circumstances, just like with Agartha in some instances. Similar rules or similar strokes for similar folks, I should say, in this, where as you cross over into this, yes, you can communicate like this, like what I'm doing, but there, even for myself, appearing to himself. Yes, there are galactic rules, but they're also, I've been in that society, I've interacted with them before. They are what you would say anal retentive or very OCD on these policies. The reason being is because they have seen regular humans misuse this. My opinion, though, is that both societies should and will eventually merge into an overarching Earth society, whereas there's more magical lineages. He's even said this about the Harry Potter movies, where he feels it needed to be less strict in that particular way. The reason he was feeling this is because he himself in other lifetimes have encountered these people, and he's abhorrent to the memory wipes because of his SSP history. So he sees them as of a kind. They really aren't. They really aren't. The people in the SSP, they're cruel in their application. These people feel they are using it to protect overall reality, like in the movies.
Okay. So do they, so people like me and Chris who have latent magical, if you want to call that, abilities, do people like us, do they take these kind of people in at times?
Yes, they do.
Train them if they view that that person's abilities are a threat, or and is it just like they miss a lot of people, like they don't have a great way to tell if somebody is of like that level where they need to take them in and they just miss a lot of people, and that's why there's so many like psychic practitioners out here.
Yes, that has actually happened. You are correct. That's happened to souls where they've misplaced them over centuries. But in a more literal sense, as far as lineage goes, yes, they have misplaced certain lines and they have misplaced certain people where they have grown up in a regular Muggle society, like you would have your Harry Potter figure, where it was more like an agreement between the Muggle society and more the magical society, since he's related to both, you see. In another scenario where it's just a magical person that is born amongst them, have more of a genetics propensity, almost like an X-Man in a way, if you want to consider it that, where certain
Yeah.
mutations come out, or if it's more like meta, or if it's more magical in that way, that this society sometimes will ignore them in order to have them maybe even change some of the rules on this side. It's very much like your galactic politics, where it's almost like the Superman story, where he had more of a stake in what happens on Earth against the corporate arm, like Lex Luthor. It is something similar to that, where the Galactics use this technique. Sometimes these magical people over here will use this technique if it just happens to happen, not that they planned for it. If they happen to find someone, they'll be like, okay, let's see what happens. let's see if they can affect changes over here to where we can actually change these rules. Sometimes that will happen, but they don't actively plan for it like the galactic community does.
Okay, so they're a bit more. Okay, I get what you're saying. Where the galactic community will place people where they think they'll do the best. These
Mm-hmm.
people don't really do that. They kind of
No.
more. Do they understand the levels of manipulation going on, or are they
Oh,
kind of
most definitely.
blind to like a lot of the other darker stuff going on?
They are completely open and see all of this. But they also not only are they protecting themselves from all the other activity that is going on, they have essentially. It's not that they don't care. This is actually a misnomer. They do care, but at the same time they know if they in times past when they have put themselves out in the open, it's opened a Pandora's box that they're not willing to do. Now with the galactic side, they also like to incarnate. Some people on this end were thinking about stuff like this and thinking about planning it, but they generally don't, unless again it's done by, you would say, accident. But again, there's no accidents for anything. But in
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, these people over here will not necessarily overtly try to change things over here.
Okay, so they're basically hands off.
Yeah, they are hands off, but the two cultures have clashed periodically in history where someone has crossed over to over there. Do they sometimes have they sometimes let them stay? Very, 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 very rarely. If they do have some kind of magical propensity, it is still the same difference like in your Fantastic Beasts with the Muggle character or the Nomad character, that no matter what he did, they still said he had to have his memory wiped. They may even enlist, not necessarily enlist help, but they may, if something has come up, like in your the two Grindelwald movies, for instance, where they had to have some kind of mixer in between there. This is what happened. This is also how Harry Potter came into it. He was kind of like supposed to be the bridge between them. Yes, do I personally see that this could eventually happen? Yes, but it would take literally an active, true benevolent source creator to get them to bud.
Okay, so this is one of those things where like it'll be post opening of the planet long time after that if it even happens.
Yes, exactly. These people do walk amongst you too. They do look
I figured
around.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, they do walk
Now,
amongst you. Yes.
like, so practitioners of magic that are outside of that society, what do they think of them? What is that society's opinion of like average people that use magic?
They have it's a mixed bag, as you would say. Some are abhorrent to it, while others are essentially in favor of it, hoping that it would create a bridge, very much like the Harry Potter character. It's essentially their society is no different than your own. It's a mixed bag of opinions and methodologies and just overall ways of viewing and seeing things, perceptions and perspectives, no different than each other. The two societies are essentially, as far as I'm concerned, one and the same, and they should merge. But again, it would take an active source, benevolent source creator to make that happen, which I'm hoping that this does. My opinion is, of course, I believe this is inevitable. That collision is inevitable in time, but they themselves over here are more set in that pattern, very much like you see in the movies.
And are they like do they have their hand? Are they involved in things like secret space program and stuff? Or are they able to like kind of be outside that because they're like, are they subject to like alien abduction and stuff as well, or not really because their power is just at a point where like that would be foolish for these groups to try to do that?
It would definitely be foolish for these groups to try to do it. They're highly advanced in that area. They also don't want to share it based on how humans on this end of the spectrum would use it towards their fellow people, from curses to
Mm-hmm.
black magic to necromancy as well. So they are very weary of that. But the darker galactic community can't necessarily touch them.
Okay. All right. That's kind of the end of my questions. I just was wondering how they act inside the greater dichotomy that is going on out there.
Yes, it is a fascinating subject. If you were to actually cross over there, you would find it very, very, very fascinating. Unfortunately, they would not find you as fascinating. I am sorry to say. It's not that they're arrogant in that way; they are just very cautious, and the caution has been warranted given their history with Orions and other beings, and also regular humans. It is warranted, but at the same time, I believe it is also based in fear, like in the movies, and should actually be undone in time. So, yes, this has been a great show. So, thank you very much.
Yep.
Oh. Yeah, he was showing me images of what some of that looked like. I could actually feel somebody from over there looking as well. They're very, from what I understood, from what I was picking up on, it was very isolationist. They seemed almost like the Sijic Order, like we were talking about in the previous, one of the previous shows. It was similar in mentality, very similar to that. But also at the same time, I remember back when I was in Nebraska, Brimble the leprechaun was coming to me and his brother Brumard. They were showing me that there was like in a building that I entered. This was in London, where I entered this building and went up in this elevator where there was this weird looking butler standing there. And you could tell he was an elf of some kind. I can't remember his name per se, but he was in a suit and a tie. I thought he was Syrian at first because he had a blue pigmentation to his skin. He had pointed ears. He said he was related to it, but he wasn't like the other darker elves or anything like that. And I got in the elevator, and the elevator could look out over the street, even though there was no windows on the outside of that building. You could still see the street level. And it's like Bleecker Street in Doctor Strange, where he entered the portal, came out on Bleecker Street there.
Yeah.
It was kind of similar, where you went up in this elevator, but the elevator kept going up, and then it stopped, came out, and the door opened, and you were in that other world there. And Brembo was trying to tell me, he said he had access ports through mailboxes, through pillars, through stairwells, back behind stairwells where you could literally walk up a stairwell in reverse and go into this other side. Like say you had stairs that went up to another floor of a building, you could literally walk the other direction upside down and enter the building on a mirror side. And closets. Granted, again, there's also these portals and hidden doorways. The elves that I have recently came in contact with, I call them Tartarian elves, but they exist in our own pocket. But I believe they fall under this purview too, because they can open up doorways and closets, and they help children out for the most part. That is a group that actually wantonly interacts with people, but they don't want a lot of humans over there. Going through their little Renaissance-looking village that they have. But in this specific case of this magical culture, I have encountered this before, and I have felt these people around. It's just like in the recent movie, it wasn't Crimes of Grindelwald. It was the one that came after it. And
the Secrets of Dumbledore, I think it was called.
Secrets of Dumbledore, yes. Whereas you saw Dumbledore sitting in the beginning, and also Grindelwald talking. They were in a neutral place in basically a Muggle restaurant, and they were talking in that environment. And then all of a sudden, Grindelwald sets the building on fire, at the very end. Well, because he considers them not equal. So he just basically, as he's leaving, he sets the building on fire. This actually happens in places like that, where sometimes things clash, wizards clash. Sometimes there's a neutral meeting, and something like what Grindelwald did does happen. I've found out. So their world does clash with ours quite frequently. We just generally don't see it. This is where some of the magical wars that are happening in the background take place. Then we have us that aren't bound to any of these treaties or agreements, that are just kind of muddling our way through, trying to figure out some of the magics and the magical energetic techniques out there to protect and create.
Yeah, because my point there is like, clearly there are people here that they would have to reveal themselves to, because they've gotten to a point of like magical knowledge where it would be too dangerous to not include them in that society.
Yes.
And so I'm like, what I mean, like, I'm just like, the question I was trying to get him to answer, but he wasn't really giving an answer to, is like, is that level, where is that level where they would have to like include you in their society because it would be too much of a risk not to?
Yeah, like it would be too much of a security risk. I think the reason he wasn't saying it is because we would try to, in our mind, set a goal. We would try to co-create that. I think that's why he didn't answer that, is because he didn't want to create like an anchor point there to like an expectation.
Yeah.
That's why he was evading that, is because he knows people like you and me would go, wait a minute, if this is a level we have to reach, I'll reach it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then even if we did something dangerous to get to that level, so it's like that's why it's more likely he didn't say it. But
Because I have a feeling that we're not too far off that level at this point.
yeah, I have this distinct thing because we're noticing too much. I think that's why also he evaded the question, because usually if they
Yeah.
remain silent or divert, we know the answer to it already. So it's like,
I know. I have a feeling that certain individuals are getting very close, and I think that's why they like as soon as they realized they were being talked into, they had a representative like look in and be like, "What? Why are they talking about this?" Like, well, first things first, they're probably mad at Isaac now for even just saying it.
of course. I felt some disgust from over there. I felt some disgust. I was
Yeah.
also able to pick up on some of the history as well. There was some of the history where why they split off what they did, not only to protect themselves, but at the same time, they are different from these other bubbles that we've heard from too. These other
Yeah.
suffering communities are very different. They're human. They've learned all of this. It's just like when we spoke about the 12 tribes of Israel or 13 tribes of Israel, whereas they just decided to vibrationally split off. This was something similar, but they saw some people misusing this in some fashion, so they wanted to create a safety net for a lot
Yeah.
of this.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, like a mystery school, but the good side of mystery school, not the Egyptian mystery schools and stuff like that, Hermes or any of those. That is some of that's been a misnomer and misused, associated with Egypt and some of the false mysticism behind Egypt. But there is a real mystery school type of thing, and that's what this would be.
Yeah.
And I get it. I can feel their leeriness. I can actually feel the emotions aimed at us right now. So they're not willing to talk or anything. It's just that I don't think they ever will be. Just like there's a group of dwarves I ran into one time that just were not willing to talk, and they were an offshoot of like not the World of Wheels, but they were more like the ones in Lord of the Rings.
I
And
ran into the same group,
yeah,
like well, at least a similar group in Switzerland.
Okay. Yeah, and they're just not interested.
Yeah.
And this wizardry group, it's not like they don't have kind people and good people there. It's just they have this really strict honor code and real strict rule book there, just exactly like in the Harry Potter movies. I know this diverted from necromancy, but this was a good diversion, I feel. So yeah, that's actually pretty good. My head's even heating up because I can feel that somebody's listening to us. When my head starts to heat up and my ears start to heat up, I know somebody's listening to us talk. So and this is good. I'm not feeling threatened by it at all. Not at all. It's actually good. It's benevolent. So I'm not really. There's a mixed bag there, like he was saying, but overall, this is actually a good concept. But he is right, huh?
I wonder if like sort of the dark magicians and stuff that are in with the cabal and those factions are people that sided with them from that society, or if those were cabal people always and just aren't included in that society.
I think it's both, actually. I think some actually drifted from one side to the other, either to keep an eye on the cabal or they fell into dark wizardry like Grindelwald. So it's the same difference. I just got this overwhelming validation that it was more like the Grindelwald side of it. Okay, so it was like I just felt this like the goosebumps over the top of my neck and back and head were just overwhelming. So that's a validation right there.
Okay, yeah, because it's just not that because even just having this creates a new like a way bigger dichotomy that we need to account for when we move in the future.
Yes, and yeah, Isaac, do you have anything else to say on this before we take it out, or? He said, "I've said too much already." Okay. Apparently somebody just chastised him, so it's like, so okay. Oh, that's he's kind of humbled a little bit. I think somebody yelled at him. I don't know, but there is a loophole where you can speak about it in channel, but at the same time, verbalizing something or seeing something changes the nature of that something that you're talking about by a little bit. So putting it in a video, people will be focused on opening the magic world up. I'd be willing to bet from the point of this airing and even this recording, it's changing that energy dynamic even as we're talking now. So and even seeing it, even me looking at it and seeing that castle structure I was looking at, it had this like Hogwarts look to it and everything. Somebody didn't like the fact that I was able to see it. Isaac was showing it to me, but I was connecting to it. So I found that interesting. There are other worlds like the ones we talked about that were more intricately involved in the Elder Scrolls they wouldn't allow people to quantumly connect to it or bilocate because it would basically open a pathway for Orions to get in there as well. So it's very similar to Elder Scrolls on those worlds Isaac was mentioning before. So I can see their trepidation. I'm feeling like we can't talk about this too much longer, but
yeah. No, or they'll show up. They'll just like pop in and be like, "Yeah, you guys are done. Come on."
I'm getting this "you're done" feel there. So it's okay. I'm honoring your wishes. You're not malevolent, so you're fine. Thank you. Thank you for even connecting to even say I'm done. Okay. Thank you. I saw it was a figure in my head in a suit doing this. He just put his hand like this and just put his hand on the thymus like this. So there was somebody like a representative they elected there.
Yeah, I figured that would happen.
Yeah, and thank you. I'll shut up now. Thank you. And Isaac, yes. Okay. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Ryan, before we take it out.
No, that was it.
Okay. All right. I know when we're supposed to cap it. So thank you everybody for watching this Halloween episode on necromancy and magic and the magical world of Harry Potter, apparently. So it went into that route. Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, very weird. Very cool though. It was a lot very synchronistically put for myself in there. Very synchronistic. So thank you everybody for watching this and have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye.